Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Miles Hannick Show. I'm Miles Hannick. What this is going to be, let me introduce it very quickly here, is a new debut program where I try to run down everything that happens in, the Penn State sporting world, whether it be the day, whatever span between episodes. I'm going to shoot for every couple of days, but we've seen in the blog, my word with timing isn't exactly perfect. But nevertheless, I think this would be a really fun hobby and something to really just, get some more thoughts out there, because I think there's a lot going on in Penn State world, not just outside of football, that really deserves some more recognition. So that's my goal, and I really want to hear feedback if there is any. But without further ado, let's jump right into the gridiron, because it has been an eventful, day or two, which is what I've compiled for since this is this debut episode. There's been a really relentless news cycle, both mostly good for once, positive, which is, something given the panic that has surrounded the program. But starting it off, Penn State got Swedish prospect Oscar Webersink, who's 6'8", 290 pounds. And with those physicals, obviously, there's a lot of bliss. There's a lot of, wow, you can't teach that, especially with the speed you've seen from him. Yeah, him being a Swedish international prospect, him coming over to St. Thomas More, he hasn't, had a ton of football upbringing or background, but I don't know, sometimes you've seen that in the offensive line specifically, that's not something that is super important. You can kind of use those physical tools above all. You see it with Max Iannaccio with the Steelers, who just got drafted first round, barely played a lick of football before, his Arizona State days. So I think that this is a very comparable pick, and I really like the direction of where Penn State's going with this one. Obviously, it was a very fast recruitment, almost a month between his commitment and his first visit. But I like that. I like this sort of fast, rapid approach, especially from the Ryan Clinton dog mentality room. You got to buy into that, brand and mentality. And if you're going to do that, don't have these long, drawn-out recruiting battles. Get your guys in there fast and have them buy in, and this is exactly, one of those cases. I'm super excited with the pickup. A lot of that dialogue has surrounded, that inability maybe with how is he going to fit in right away, not playing football. But I'm honestly not a ton worried about it. I think St. Thomas More, it's a great program. It really is. He couldn't have picked probably anywhere else, maybe Modern Day or something, the big fish in high school to go to. But this is a really good school when it comes to developing guys. They continuously see guys go off to, the SEC. And, primarily that is on the defensive side of the ball. Their head coach is a more defensive guy, and that has been their specialty, especially in the linebacker defensive front. But I don't think it's any different, and it makes any different that they know how to develop and get the best out of their players. And especially their offensive line coach Phil Simplicico is only a 3-year guy, and I've really liked what I've seen early in his career. And I think it's going to be a great situation for Webersink to come in and develop. Those guys, this coaching staff, this program know how to assess and send off talent to the next level better than they came in. And it's not like he's coming into this offensive line, playing at this level where he needs to be that Penn State commit. Yeah, he's committed for his physicals and maybe not his skills necessarily right away. And maybe there's that expectation that might come in when he steps onto a high school field. But I don't think that that's going to be necessarily a problem, because this offensive line that St. Thomas More has looks solid. They have Byron Axtell, who's a Bryant commit, and then Owen Lyons, who's a other-sided guard, who's got multiple camps going, and Bodie Mars also on that line. It's a very solid situation for Webersink, not one where he's going into a coaching staff or a line that necessarily needs him to live up to that label that comes with being a Penn State commit, because ultimately we know where he's at, and I think they do too. It's a really good team. They finished 6-4 last season, and I know, you see it's close to 500, but they brought a QB and an RB for post-grad years. They have a really solid lineup. 4-star linebacker Christian King, who's also a Penn State commit on the other side of the ball. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you see multiple guys, maybe Colton List, their tight end, who's a 3-star, get an offer. But just in general, just this program really do a lot of things good for Penn State, and it all starts with Webersink's development, I believe. We'll see if Matt Campbell can also land Christian King, but I believe this Webersink start is just the, building to a great relationship in St. Thomas more. But nevertheless, it's more important in securing your outside flanks, which I think Webersink is going to be absolutely essential and important to do. That speed that I've seen with that size is just one of a kind, and I think it'll be really important to have something like that. It's not something I've really seen or believed that has happened on the outside in a long time for Penn State. But moving on, I mean, he's not the only tackle that Penn State seemed to target. Offensive tackle Ty Winn, 4-star of the class of 2028. I've been really, really impressed with this guy's talent. I mean, he's a dual sport with basketball, and this guy's been one of the fastest risers in recruiting that I've seen. Any big name school has been, circling this guy, and I really think Penn State needs to lock him down. He posted that his official visit is penciled in for the White Out game, which is now confirmed for USC later this year. I don't think there was an official word until Ty Winn posted that's confirmed now, but it's good to get some confirmation, and I think it's worth it if we let this man make the announcement. I mean, they need to lock down both of these guys. I can't imagine a combination of Webersink and Ty Winn on both sides in 2028. I mean, I know I'm thinking a few years ahead here, but these two guys, I've really liked what I've seen as just physical prospects, and getting them to Penn State, I think, is extremely important, and it looks like that's trending the right direction. I know there's been a lot of panic with the recruiting developments as of late, but these two have been ones that I, think outweigh maybe those losses. You can see guys like all those skill positions they've lost, the corners, the disappointment, the Khalil Taylor tossing his cap. To me, these two tackle moves, even though they only secured one, Ty Winn looks like he may want to lean here. I don't know. I just really like securing these guys because there's only one guy that's 6'8", 290, can move as fast as him. There's only one Ty Winn who's, that tackle, can play basketball, has those physical abilities. There's a ton of receivers. You can develop those guys, and this staff has shown that ability. So I'm extremely happy with where recruiting is trending, and I know that might be somewhat of a weird take given where a lot of these people have, assessed, and maybe even some of my past blogs, but it appears that the noise may be, getting loud, but we'll see. It's definitely not a pin, and I think it's an ongoing. I definitely want to see them get some edge, maybe a linebacker, but we'll talk about that going forward. We do have more to talk about. Former Penn State running back Tikey Hayes. More to talk about regarding the portal, that is. Tikey Hayes, former WPIAL in-state standout, Western Pennsylvania standout. He was incredible. I really thought this guy was going to have a bigger role with Penn State, a 4-star. There was a lot of talk of him maybe being that third guy early last season behind, Singleton and Catron. He obviously ever wasn't going to take touches away, but that was a real possibility. He obviously didn't do that. He didn't really appear much at all, and now we hear he's ended up in Nebraska. There's a lot to break down with this move. Obviously, it came out that he had departed the program, I believe it was in December, and he was with Iowa Western Community College. I think that's an amazing move, to be honest with you. It may say something about you leaving your program in the middle of the season, but I think if you're not being utilized, I don't think there's anything wrong with him just leaving and going to do something else that's better for him. And if he thinks that's Iowa Western Community College, well be it. I mean, he's ended up in a spot where he could potentially get some touches next year, and we'll talk about that, but it's definitely unprecedented. I mean, I've been here 4 years now at Penn State, and it's definitely weird to see him leave mid-season because he's not the only one. Tight end Joey Schaeffler did it too, who now is at Temple. Both happened in that November-December period, so it's just that I will say is unprecedented for sure, or maybe not unprecedented, but just weird given it's not any, personal reason. Maybe you see those guys leave if it's legal or personal issues. That didn't seem the case. It was just more career moves for both of these guys. But other than that, I can't lie that they weren't good moves for both of them, especially Hayes. They have Mekhi Nelson, who looked to be a top-line running back. He's dealing with some off-the-field stuff. They have Ike Mosey, who really does look like he could be their only other guy besides Hayes. Jamal Rule, Quentin Ives, Connor Booth. Ivies and Booth look like they're long shots, but I mean, besides Mozzie, it looks like Rule is really the only competition for Hayes, and I believe that Hayes can wholeheartedly beat out Rule. Now, Mozzie had a great season last year, and I do think he'll be the de facto starter, but I won't lie that I think that this is something that all turned up well for Hayes, and I won't lie that I don't think this is a good move for Nebraska. Definitely given, it's late in the portal, and you can tell that this is something that you're not necessarily solid on as your backfield. It's good to add some insurance there, and I really, do want to see him flourish as much as there's some animosity growing between the Cornhuskers and the Nittany Lions, and, it's always been there. I think this is something that, as long as he doesn't, do some crazy game whenever he eventually may face Penn State, he could become a real starter, and he could be someone who looks back at this and will say, wow, he was just stuck behind some great players at Penn State, and that was it. Maybe not, one got away type of thing, but just, something where situations maybe just didn't align. I mean, I'm glad that that's, sort of working out for him. But moving on, keeping it in the backfield and maybe branching it out a little bit, but ending with our portal talk, Penn State updated a lot of their measurements, numbers, a lot of their, figures when it comes to their roster page today. 6 players saw their numbers change. James Peoples, running back, went from 23 to number 1. Defensive end Ikenna Ezogu went from number 88 to number 1, both on RB and a defensive end. So they'll obviously be interesting to see what they do on special teams, because only one of them can be out there, and those are 2 guys who are going to be, potential high-value players in their position. So that balance will definitely be interesting. It's something I want to watch. But moving on, wide receiver Peter Gonzalez went from number 84 to number 7. QB Connor Berry, who I'm really looking forward to, has went from number 17 to number 10. Defensive end Yvonne Kamaju went from number 9 to number 19. Defensive tackle Keanu Williams will now wear number 99 instead of number 97. So it's very mute there. I do like the Peoples wearing number 1, and like I said, that special teams battle will be interesting to watch, but other than that, it's real minor moves. But sure, get these guys their top numbers. But the real one that is a standout is these new height and weight measurements. Now, not much changed with the heights, but the weights is where I want to spend a lot of focus. And now, it was all for the freshmen. We got their official weigh-in because obviously now they're on campus. And that gave me the idea to, compare it to their 24/7s or their socials, what they had up. So I pulled up all their 24/7s, and I wanted to look, freshman by freshman. How has these weight programs, been benefiting them? Because, those 24/7s, those are their numbers they're putting in. So they're pretty accurate to where they would be senior year. Then, it was very revealing. The biggest one, of course, was those guys in the trenches. The weight room has been really, really well utilized by them. Pete Eglitis, 270 to 295. Sorry for pronouncing it wrong, but you got 25 pounds on, and that's what focus. That's what matters. Jackson Ford, the guy who was the only one on the early signing day class, 240 to 264, 24 pounds. Mason Bandhauer, the biggest one, 260 to 297. Christian Askew, Keon Kaiser, Josiah Zayas, Tyrell Chapman all put on 15 pounds. Pretty much everyone on the freshman class gained weight. It's good to see. I mean, it's really good to see. The development is not going to cease with, a new coach in charge, and it just seems that they're really going to get these guys ready come fall. Obviously, a lot of these freshmen probably won't play. There's not much need for them to. But down the line, I mean, these guys are going to be ready, and it's going to be especially in the trenches, something built on absolute size, which I'm excited to, really see, because that's something that obviously we've seen some good offensive lines under James Franklin, but I just haven't seen a philosophy like what I'm seeing with these new, like I said, that dog mentality, and just to bring straight girth onto the, girth and dirt, just in the middle of the trenches to decide everything. I absolutely love it. And it's clear that that's something they're trying to, cultivate early, and that's extremely important. It'll be interesting to see, if we continue to see that uptick, I'm definitely going to keep these numbers down to see, sophomore year where Ford, Bandhauer, these guys get. It'll be interesting to see if they're done. I doubt it, but yeah, they'll be ready. I have no doubt with this. But putting a pin in our football talk, there's a little bit of basketball news. Obviously, I have my basketball podcast with Chase Mitchell and Will Horseman, so I'm only going to touch on this briefly, but there was the National Basketball Association of Coaches awarded Penn State with their academic team award for having a 3+ team GPA. Congratulations, great stuff. Eli Rice and Sal Sessiani got individual awards. Along with that, opening book came out for the national championship. Penn State was there. There were some surprises, but it's interesting. A lot of the dialogue around hoops has been, bottom feeders about what you'd expect. So I'm not going to get into it too much because, like I said, we have that other pod with us that you can definitely listen to and hear more about. But yeah, I think basketball's going in a great direction. We have our first media coming up, so stay tuned definitely on that front and make sure you listen with the pod with us. Now, pivoting to the diamond. You have softball and baseball where there's been an extremely busy day. They've both held camps. Softball held a pitching camp with multiple prospects coming to town. Baseball also had a camp. But that is all what's paling in comparison when it comes to baseball. There was a lot of big news. The draft is obviously done. 2 commits and Michael Anderson are off to the pros. But other than that, there's a few other departures. Mason Butash, who was a key pitcher in Penn State's, rotation. Obviously, they weren't great from the mound. He's off to Minnesota. I'm a little bit surprised by that. 3 seasons with the Nittany Lion, 7.77 ERA. I mean, obviously, there's a lot to be demanded there. I'm surprised he's staying in the Big Ten. I would have thought maybe he would have went somewhere else to, maybe try to improve those numbers, get things, back to square one. But nevertheless, he will no longer be with the Nittany Lions after entering the transfer portal earlier this offseason. The other arm that is now gone will be Colin Fitzgerald, who, after not getting picked up in the draft and finishing his redshirt senior year with Penn State after 3 years with Maine, has signed a UDFA deal with the Athletics. Now, I really like this for them. Obviously, the Athletics are in a period where they need to test a lot of things out, and the Athletics actually brought in a lot of UDFAs comparable to, a high amount compared to other organizations. Only a few other pitchers with that group, so there is maybe a leg up, but their draft was stacked full of them. After their first round pick, they had, I think it was 3 straight pitchers. 3 straight pitchers and then a ton drafted. So there's obviously a need for pitching there, and yeah, that's good for his career because if he can make, any sort of statement early, he can obviously fast track that because there's that demand clearly. I think obviously there's a little bit of, uptick that needs to have with his production, 6.20 ERA. There's not much, but he was their opening, Friday day arm. So he is the best that Penn State really had last season. And while maybe they didn't have the best, like I said, from the approach from the rubber, I think he can show that it wasn't him because he did have some moments in those opening days. But nevertheless, it'll be interesting to see what he can do with that organization that has a lot coming in its future. But it's not just the MLB that has a lot coming to its future, but a little bit of its magic coming to college, we'll say. The ABS system is finally coming, and this is something I've been waiting for, just because I think you've seen, the 2-base rule and other things. There's been a little bit of this testing some things in college before the pros and the minors, and this is finally something that we've seen work in the pros that's coming to college. This is amazing, and I think it's really something that's going to... there's no other way to say it. It's better. It's just good for the game of baseball to get these honest calls in line. Obviously good for the umpires. You're going for NCAA umpires who want to get better. Knowing your zone and having a live fact check is going to be good for them. Maybe different from MLB, umpires who have a little bit of an ego. But speaking of egos, I do think it'll be interesting to see if some college guys can maybe handle it. I do think I can see a scenario where, maybe some college guys lose it with some ABS stuff. because there's a little bit of lesser discipline, let's say, with, obviously younger kids, but I don't know, maybe that's just me thinking a little bit wild. I think it's a great development, and keeping it Penn State, I am going to say that I think they're going to be one of the worst ABS challenging teams when it eventually happens. Just not much discipline, I believe, from this squad, and that's my way to put a Penn State spin on that. Definitely can't wait till it's actually implemented, though. Long time coming. But moving to women's lacrosse, keeping with the additions, however, they made 2 additions today out of the transfer portal. Midfielder Devin Livingston committed from Maryland. She had a strong freshman year where she was top 10 from inside the cross, 25 points and 19 goals. She had a down year last season, only 16 games and 4 points, 3 goals. I think that that's obviously something that you can definitely improve, but it's a little bit worrying to see that dip down in production. But attacker Caroline Panzrier joins from Colgate at John Jay College. Before that, she played 50 games, 161 points over her career, 102 goals. She only played 2 goals last season, so both these two kind of are in this boat where they're hungry to prove something after, their last seasons maybe didn't go the way the year prior did for them. But I think there's no better person than Kayla Treanor in her program to get that out of them. She's seen it, throughout her first year in charge, where she's just able to get the most out of her talented players. And not only that, just have an eye for talent. So just to put a quick sum up on that and a quick, synopsis, I just think that this approach of just maybe getting these people who have something to prove is going to be something beneficial to Treanor. And I'm really excited for them. Obviously, their team had a good year last season, but with these type of additions, I think they can really, make a leg up, and especially with Rockette Allen, just getting the great players around her is essential. And I think these two are those who could do that, especially, someone from midfield like Livingston, who also has offensive capabilities, but then also Panzrier, who could take some of that goal scoring, load off with a lot of your upperclassmen leaving. So yeah, I'm excited to see where the, women's lacrosse heads next season under Treanor, and it all starts with her. But finishing it off, we have a couple of bonus topics. The PIAA announced that there will be no changes for their championship venues, meaning that Penn State will host lacrosse high school championships at Panzer Stadium, boys volleyball at Rec Hall, which is amazing experience for anyone who gets to go there. Softball will be at Beard Field at Nittany Lion Softball Park. Baseball will be at Medlar Field at Lebrano Park. And those round out the 4 venues for the Nittany Lions more than any other university. Obviously, that's great for them, and no change is always good to bring these nice high school kids up to Penn State without a, almost like a non-official visit. Get them to see the facilities and say, hey, you could be here if you're a Nittany Lion. But that's a new development, not really a surprise. They're the best facilities in the nation, so I wouldn't expect them to go any other way. Closing it up, we have to talk about Neeli Bendapudi and her recent involvement in the sports world. She met with a few other presidents and legislators to discuss the new Protect College Sports Act, which has had, a lot of debate surrounding it, and I'm not going to act like I know all the intricacies of it. I don't. It's obviously something that does still need ironed out, I will admit to that, and that is absolutely true. I don't think that anyone is in current agreement of where we're at, and all it's going to take is dialogue, and Bendapudi has positioned herself early to be one of the mainstays in that conversation. She penned a letter to Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman, and she, expressed her displeasures for this act. I want to read off a few of these statements. There was no adjustment to language indicating that NIL deals between associated entities and student athletes count towards the cap. If unaddressed, this application as written will result in denying potentially hundreds of millions of dollars to student athletes, primarily those who play the sports that generate the most revenue in football and men's basketball. That point, which was her first one that she wrote, I loved it for multiple reasons, because I think it hit the nail on the head, and also too, it's kind of I think, a flip-flop from the rhetoric we've seen like 30 years ago, where it's like, well, 40 years ago, where these guys weren't being paid. Now it's like, well, they're being denied money that they should get, and millions of that. I like that she also roped in men's basketball too, because that's an interesting point, because I think for Penn State specifically, the position of it being a revenue driver is interesting. Yeah, it brings in a lot of revenue compared to other sports, but I've criticized the investment, yes, and I've criticized that product. And just its very mention to me just feels, I don't know. I always just like that it's looped in with the big dog. Let's just say that. That's a good way to put it. Is it true? Yes, they generate the revenue. Maybe getting them that revenue in the future, like Bendapudi writes, is just essential. Carrying on, she writes, legal liability protection provided by the bill remains so narrow that the spate of nonstop litigation that has plagued college sports is sure to continue, particularly with the trend in the area moving away from federal court and alleged antitrust violations to state courts and local jurisdictions using varied legal theories. This is the one that I think hits the nail on the head also as well. I mean, she just can't miss here. Bendapudi is I'm not going to read out all the points, but those are the two that absolutely just were perfect for me, because, I mean, we've seen it all the time. Every injunction is going to these state levels, and there's been loopholes for what district courts to try to do it in, and there has been no clear blanket way to solve this all. And she's admitting that, hey, this isn't the blanket way to solve this all, which is what we're all looking for. Again, another hit. I mean, you can't get much better. I would not want to play battleships against Bendapudi. She would get hit she'd sink them all in every hit, I guess. She's hitting them all. But then the last one that I absolutely love, which was her last point, and the cherry on top. Quote, there were no substantial changes to Title II, which singles out the Big Ten and Southeastern conferences and imposes in perpetuity restrictions that would not apply to any other conference or entity not yet in existence. That's true. Yes, I love this point for the reason that we're making. Yes, the SEC and the Big Ten are the two that bring in all the money and all the views for football. We can't have this language be too common, because the lower levels of Power 4 conferences, of Group of 6, these are what makes college football better than the NFL. That level of, disparity between the levels that you can have any given Saturday. I mean, I know the saying is every given Sunday, but that's becoming less and less compared to, what you've seen in college football, like Indiana winning, or just the miracle upsets, and maybe even NIU of a few years ago, which has stuck out to me in my lifetime, especially when this new era of NIL. But carrying on with that, and I think this ties in a little bit to what I'm saying, is the entity not yet in existence part kind of worries me, because that whole Super League talk that was thrown around briefly between, the top programs, some fans liked it, some didn't. I absolutely hate it. And I think, while yes, this doesn't say, hey, we're going to do this, leaving that door open, which, I mean, I know that's not what she's doing. She's speaking in jargon of technicalities and legal ploys to saying, hey, you're building something that doesn't protect the future. But still, this is me just hitting the red panic button. When I see even the inkling in it that, there could be a Super League assembled, I panic. That would be the only strain on this letter, but that's just me having to stick up my ass and talking for no reason. I absolutely think she's penned an absolutely great letter, and she's being a great, representative and of the university and these young people. And I've seen a lot of people really cherish her for these messages. So there'll be a lot of development on the legal side and the athletic side, and it'll be very crucial to see where she positions herself going on into all of it. But yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of flubs in this first episode, a lot of misspoken, things. Maybe I wouldn't call this my most fluid one, but hey, it's a development. We got to all start somewhere. I'm going to hit the pavement running. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep my head up. And we're going to keep going. I can officially put episode 1 in the books, and I will see you all when the news comes in.